This is kind of something that happens to most people. What they're doing may or may not be who they are.
Michael Jackson made more people happy than just about anyone who's ever lived. And he was a disaster of a human being. Look, if there is like a particular thing that I'm interested in creating, you can't be a fan of everything and then still have time to make stuff.
Pee-wee made people laugh. Larry David makes people laugh. Kevin Lieber makes people smarter. But I have to assume that you also want to be you.
Hey, welcome to The Great Unknown, the home of Make Something Mean Something. The success of misery is upon us. My name is Kevin Lieber, and with me, as always, is Matthew Tabor.
I don't know if you can see this on the video. Can you? Can you see my Apple Watch tan?
No.
You
Oh,
see this
kind
on my
of.
wrist?
Yeah, wow, look at that. Yeah, that's a very
I have
modern farmer's tan.
It is. And I feel, like you can see the t-shirt farmer's tan decently. I mean, the light is a little funny on it, but I looked down and I went to charge my watch and I'm like, I have an Apple Watch tan. Who have I become?
Yeah, I don't know.
I remember having it like a Teva sandal tan in like 6th grade.
Oh.
That was a long time ago, 30 plus years, whatever. But yeah, an Apple Watch. I don't know how to feel about this. I really don't.
I don't know. It's kind of embarrassing.
Do you still have the little Playboy bunny ears suntan tattoo on your, like where your appendix should be?
Yeah, why?
I haven't seen one of those in a while.
I know. No one even knows what we're talking about. I've been thinking a lot recently for a few reasons about the misery that comes along with success. So I wanted to talk to you about that today because a few things popped, a couple of months ago, maybe there was this documentary on Max about Pee-wee Herman. Now,
yeah.
If you're listening to this and you're as old as Matt and I, then you understand that Pee-wee Herman was the most famous, gigantic thing. I mean, aside from Michael Jackson in all of the 1980s, it was basically Michael Jackson was head and shoulders above everybody. And then you get down to like the next tier. And I feel as though Pee-wee was basically at the top of that next tier of just uber famous.
Right. There's a really icons. That tier you're talking about is like iconic people that had a visual style too. And it was people like Hulk Hogan, Pee-wee Herman, Mr. T, Madonna, a handful of people who were like visually recognizable nationwide and worldwide, and in different types of entertainment, and Pee-wee, based on the look and the sound and just everything about him, he had like top to bottom comedy too, whereas a lot of the wonderful comedians of the 80s, and the 80s were the golden age of stand-up comedy. It just was.
It was
right?
Huge. It was huge in the 80s, yeah.
Yeah, it was constantly on TV. And I mean, it was the biggest deal in the world. Stand-up comedy was just such a big deal. But Pee-wee entertained kids too. George Carlin was not doing a kids show in 1981. Sam Kinison and Andrew Dice Clay weren't appealing to the under 18s. At least if they did, their parents hadn't given permission for this. But Pee-wee had adult humor. Pee-wee had kids humor. He had Pee-wee's Playhouse as a TV show. So he had an elevated persona. You're right. That's why he was top tier, because he was beloved, whether you were 4 or 104.
Yeah. So the documentary was interesting because it was about Paul Reubens, who is the man behind Pee-wee. And what was fascinating to me about it is the majority of it had to do with his conflict between being Paul Reubens, a human being named Paul Reubens, and then this persona that he played called Pee-wee Herman. What was really interesting to me, and something that, I had never thought about, and I don't think most people ever think about, which is why I want to talk about it, is because I like to talk about things that people don't think about, is that Paul Reubens at one point made a deliberate, conscious effort to abandon being Paul Reubens, to abandon basically everything about himself, including his relationships, his romantic relationships, his sexual orientation, to become a different person named Pee-wee Herman. Even going so far as the credits in Pee-wee's Big Adventure, which was the big, mass appeal breakthrough film that launched Pee-wee to stardom, it says Pee-wee Herman as himself in the credits. Did you know that?
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah,
it's Pee-wee Herman
yeah.
as himself. So it's not, Pee-wee Herman by Paul Reubens. What was interesting is that in the credits, though, it was co-written by Paul Reubens. So he used Paul Reubens in the writing credit, but not in the actor's credit. But basically the rest of his life, he never really was Paul Reubens again. He was only Pee-wee Herman. And as a result, he was a really, really isolated and strange and lonely person, because he never managed to meld the two, really. I mean, later on in his career, he did start doing some acting gigs as Paul Reubens here and there, which I think probably helped him a lot. But for the most part, he was not himself. He was somebody else for his entire life.
Yeah. What was the name of the show with James Spader? Was it The Blacklist? He had a recurring role on that was really good. He was awesome in his old age, but there's one thing, I have to say this, I have to point this out. It's absolutely obligatory that Paul Reubens is the pride of Oneonta, New York.
He mentions it once, disparagingly in the documentary. Yeah. He's not glowing about Oneonta, New York.
He's dead. I'd say he's dead to me, but he is dead. So, I'll say the most hurtful thing I can say to Paul Reubens and his legacy. Now, both Pee-wee Herman and Paul Reubens are dead to me. Yeah. Well, he was born in Oneonta, and I don't know how long he stayed there, but I don't think it was all that long. No. I think he was 7 or 8 or something when they moved.
Yeah.
But that's in the rough neck of the woods that Kevin and I are from. So I have to assume that that's what inspired you, Kevin, to do that thing in the theater.
Oh. yes. I did a copycat offense from the whole Paul Reubens. Yeah, his dark days of getting arrested for pleasuring himself in a movie theater. That was part of the downfall of him, and
it's a good marker of downfall too. When that's happening, things aren't good. It's probably an indicator of other problems.
Yeah. There were a lot
but
of
the phenomenon
problems
you're describing, though, yeah, I believe this. The phenomenon you're describing, though, it sounds like it should be really unique in that he's invented this character, has to become that character, and then his persona goes away. It atrophies in the world, and all sorts of problems ensue in his mind and life. But I don't think it's very unique. And I assume that's why you want to talk about it, because this is kind of something that happens to most people. where what they're doing may or may not be who they are. And even if they're doing the sort of thing that is who they are, it can be such an outsized portion of how other people see them that the actual person is kind of hiding there and isolated. And that's miserable. It truly is lonely and miserable.
Yeah, I just thought of this. I didn't think about this before we started recording, but it just came into my mind that I just listened to a thing yesterday where Larry Charles, who was one of the original writers for Seinfeld, and later was a director for Curb Your Enthusiasm. Okay. He made, supposedly, I guess we'll never know, like a beautiful documentary about Larry David. During sort of like the COVID years where everything was shut down, I guess he spent a bunch of time with Larry David and made this like gorgeous documentary dedicated to him and his life. And the day before it was meant to go live, literally the day before, I mean, you could look up like a trailer and there were posters, like this thing was supposed to come out. The day before this documentary was supposed to come out, Larry David like freaked out about it and pulled it and did not allow it to come out because of the same exact thing that you're talking about, that you just mentioned, where supposedly the documentary was about like Larry David, the guy, the human being, not the like cranky, overly neurotic George Costanza, which was his proxy on Seinfeld, or like the even more cranky and neurotic Larry David character from Curb Your Enthusiasm. It was about Larry David, like the thoughtful, gentle, I don't know, pensive, sad guy. And he freaked out about that coming out. Like he did not want, for whatever reason he had, like he was against people seeing the real man. Whether he thought that it would like diminish their opinion of him or like alter how they think of his comedy, I have no idea. You'd have to ask him. But it is the exact thing that you're talking about, where like there was this vulnerability of exposing the person behind the character, and he shut it down. He didn't want people to know, which is something that Paul Reubens also talks about in his documentary, where he didn't want people to know Paul Reubens. He wanted to just be Pee-wee Herman. Everyone loved Pee-wee Herman. He could sort of hide whatever things he hated about himself or was afraid to share and just live sort of vicariously as himself, though. That's why this is so weird and complex of a subject. It's like, okay, that's still you. You still are right. Pee-wee Herman. They still love you, but psychologically it's not you. And that's a completely different character. With Larry David, it is him. And then the character that he's playing is a heightened, exaggerated version of him. And he still wants those things to remain separate, in the public eye.
It's got to be kind of terrifying, though, to have that level of vulnerability out of nowhere. I mean, he's not young, right? He's been this specific guy to everybody for a very long time. And then, then all of a sudden it's like taking the mask off for the first time. And even if it's a good reveal, it's like, actually, Larry David is a wonderful man. I don't know this, but it sounds from what you said like that was what was shown in this doc. He's exposed. He's exposed in a way that he'd never been, ever. So I can see being incredibly nervous about that. You'd think that he would have considered that in the whole process, but this is so like Vibecat is in the Discord and mentioned this thing about, fame versus keeping to yourself, whatever. And, I've seen you, I'm going to throw you under the bus. Okay. Great. I fired up the bus and you're going under the bus. I've literally seen this with you where you go to something like a VidCon in the past, and these people are running up to you and saying things about, math and science and space and all of this stuff, as if that is just 100% of your life, that everything about you and your persona and your mind is in service of the Vsauce. And we know, veterans of this podcast know, veterans of Knowing Kevin know, that there is actually more to him than his Vsauce related career. That's only a tiny portion. Just like Larry David is, only a portion of him is, cranky neurotic man. But it doesn't even occur to these people that, you would probably rather talk to them about the 49ers than like a space and time paradox.
Yeah.
It doesn't even occur to them that you might like the 49ers, or sports or anything, so there's a big mismatch here. And it's not that people don't want it too. The people who've opened up their lives online have been generally, fantastically successful because people like that. When they think it's real, sometimes it's real, sometimes it is not. Right. But this is a very difficult thing to navigate because you do want to provide all of that value to people, not to make it clinical when I say value, but like Pee-wee made people laugh. Larry David makes people laugh. Kevin Lieber makes people smarter. This is good value to the world. So you want to do all of that, but I have to assume that you also want to be you to some degree.
Yeah. And the other thing that I really wanted to highlight in this discussion is the trade-off that comes along with this, because that's really what I thought of when I watched the Pee-wee documentary. It's what I thought of yesterday when I heard this Larry David story, is that they're like the price of success. I mean, there are trade-offs no matter what you do in life. It doesn't have to do, you don't only encounter trade-offs when you're Pee-wee Herman and you're one of the most famous people on earth. But those trade-offs are heightened to such a degree that it makes like a really clear and illustrative point as to how this works. There are like micro trade-offs that no matter who you are, you encounter every single day. When you're someone like Pee-wee, you give, or someone like Paul Reubens, we've done it talking about Pee-wee.
I know.
We've erased Paul from the discussion completely, which is that's the trade-off for that. This was the trade-off for him, is that he erased himself in order to become like one of the most beloved characters of all time. That's a pretty heavy price to pay in order to become successful. And I'm not saying, and I certainly don't think he regretted it, or like, this is why you shouldn't pursue greatness or excellence or anything, because it's not worth it. I'm sure that at least I hope he thought it was worth it to, entertain and inspire and just bring joy to literally millions and millions of people. Hopefully he thought that was worth it, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't painful.
Yeah.
Like you watch that documentary and you see the pain on this guy's face where it's like, I'm probably glad that I did this. I had a lot of great opportunities and a lot of great, moments that I'm proud of. But at the same time, it's like, I can't leave my house. I only talk to my maid every day, or my personal assistant. I have 2 friends that I'm not sure how much they like me actually, or they just want to be associated with Pee-wee. All of it gets really, what the greatest actual example of this is, going back to Michael Jackson.
Oh yeah.
Michael Jackson was the most beloved person of our lifetimes. 100%.
You think so?
No one ever came close. Yeah. I think so. I think so. I mean, he was selling out football stadiums, and half the crowd was literally losing consciousness and fainting at his appearance.
I might give this to you if we say worldwide. I think as a global beloved icon, you're probably right. And I mean, that's a higher level.
Yeah.
like that's a big deal.
World.
But he must have been the world's most recognizable entertainer. Broadly beloved. Yeah, I think you're right. It's hard though, because, so much of that was twisted in the final years.
Yeah.
That changed a bit, but I'd say his peak, from late 70s through the 80s, the post Jackson 5 era.
Right.
It's probably hard to dispute that. Yeah. Okay. I'll give it to you.
Yeah. Yeah. And before that, probably Elvis. And before that, I don't know who, Bob Hope, Babe Ruth. I don't know. But the point is, like, Michael Jackson made more people happy than just about anyone who's ever lived.
Yep.
And he was a disaster of a human being. Like, his life was horrible, like absolutely horrible. I read a story one time where they rented out a supermarket so that he could experience what it's like to go food shopping.
Right. Yeah.
Think about that.
No, I've heard that with a lot of people, that they have to do things that, like, if you want to enjoy, a theme park or something like that, they'll do like a stay late, stay open late 2 hours or open 2 hours early or whatever, so that somebody can go in and do it, which it's not the whole experience, but like, at least you can go on, the Thrasher 9000 coaster or something like that. But all those normal things like going to a movie theater and stuff that, like, now you could have a home theater that's real. And, 1962, you couldn't. Old restaurants so often have private rooms, like kind of iconic restaurants, because it's like you couldn't just throw them at a table in the middle and not have them be bothered by too many people. Yeah. So there were a lot of examples with him, but a lot of other people had to do that too.
Well, think about how weird it is. Okay, so it's like, oh, I would love to see what it's like to be a normal person going food shopping. Okay, no problem, Michael. We'll just rent out, this supermarket, and then we'll hire a bunch of actors to, browse and walk around so that you can get a sense of what it's like to walk amongst strangers. But the whole thing is completely artificial. So even the attempt at experiencing normalcy is fake, is like as fake as can be. The whole thing is just a charade. So imagine that's your life, where you have to invent a scenario under which you get to feel like a normal person for like half an hour buying macaroni and cheese. That's crazy. That's crazy. But that is the trade-off. And there are a lot of YouTubers, who pay heavy prices as well for working 14 hours a day, nonstop, 7 days a week. To the streamers, especially, like, your life is very, very weird, where they accept that trade-off because, they're the popular ones are compensated well. They make a lot of money. And then you also have all of these fans who you don't actually know, but they adore you and they tell you as much. So you do know that you are, providing value to people and people like what you're doing. So that's fulfilling, obviously. But at the same time, it's not a normal life. It's not possible to do both. That's the trade-off.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I do have a solution to this. It's a perfect solution, and I've actually done it my whole life. If you are a failure, if you're just an abject loser, you never have to deal with this. This is what I've done. If you just stink, you just be yourself all the time. The problem here is the success. That's the issue. if you want to be you, you just have to just be like a 2 out of 10 person. So don't be good at anything. Don't try hard. Don't work hard. Don't put yourself out there, and you'll never have to deal with any of this.
Well, yeah, I don't know how happy those people are either. I don't know. But it seems like
no,
they're
unhappy in different ways. Yes.
Yeah, in different ways. The other thing that really blew my mind recently was I was listening to Scott Adams, who created Dilbert, talk about how improbable it was to get Dilbert made in the first place. And like with every sentence of his telling of this story, my mind continued to explode in ways that I previously didn't think it could explode any further. Like the series of improbable events that led to Dilbert the comic strip being something that everyone knew in the 90s.
Yeah.
It was ridiculous. It was just so improbable that it's like, how so I won't be able to do it justice. I'll just give the Cliff Notes version of it. The first part of the Cliff Notes version is that he had this idea that he wanted to be a cartoonist. Apparently from like the age of 6, this is what he wanted to do, which is, kind of interesting to begin with. What 6-year-old dreams of drawing comic strips?
Yeah, it's a little odd.
It's a little peculiar, to say the least.
Yep.
And he didn't know how to do it. I don't know what year this was. I'm guessing sometime in the 80s. There was no internet. You can't Google how to become comic strip artist. He got home from work one day and caught the very end of a program on PBS that was like how to become a cartoonist. They had like a TV show. Yeah, like a program on PBS, how to become a cartoonist. The problem was he had caught like the last 2 minutes of this show. So he basically missed the whole show, caught the last 2 minutes, but had the wherewithal to grab a pencil and a piece of paper and write down the name of the person who made this show. Okay. So he watched the credits and then copied down like who the executive producer was or whatever of this program. And then he writes this guy a letter that's like, hey, dear John Mayberry, I missed your show on PBS. Oh, I should back up for a second and remind people that
John Mayberry played for.
I just made that name
the
up.
Royals.
No.
He played for the Royals.
Okay. Yeah, well, it wasn't a baseball player.
Yeah, I just popped it in the episode chat. He played for the Royals in the 70s.
Yeah. All right. So it wasn't Royals famed outfielder John Mayberry. So anyway, I wanted to say he couldn't record it. He couldn't, once a TV show back in the old days, once a TV show was over, it was gone. It disappeared. You couldn't watch it again. You couldn't see a clip of it on YouTube. There was no internet, like I said. And unless for some reason you had a VCR set to record the program, which he obviously didn't do, the show was just lost in the ether. Mm-hmm. So anyway, so he writes this random guy who makes this show about how to be a cartoonist a letter. And it's just like, hey, I missed your program. I don't know what to do. I just saw the end of it. Can you tell me how to become a cartoonist? He snail mails him this letter. And then like a few months later, the guy actually remarkably wrote him back.
We've talked about this. How many times have we said how responsive experts usually are? They love when you ask them things like in good faith. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like you've done it 100 times mm-hmm. where they will respond to you and they love to talk about their life's work, especially to somebody who's really interested and not looking for like some quick boost or like talk to a famous person or whatever. So I completely believe that he writes this letter and then the guy is like, oh, this is probably the one letter I've gotten about my PBS cartooning show. Other than like 20 unsolicited pitches.
Yes.
This is great. And I'll take the time to respond. So do that. By the way, do that in the world. What's the worst that happens? You don't get a response. So what?
Yeah.
It costs you nothing.
Yeah. Cause virtually nobody does. So you will tend to stand out if you actually, put like a good faith note out there. We had that with the podcast with the guy who was Steven, who did the manga. He sent a really nice email about me about his manga and blah, blah, blah. So yeah, I wrote him back. I bought his manga. We talked about it on the podcast. Like, this is how this stuff works. You should reach out to people. So he sends him the letter, tells him what to do, which involves, sending his comics to like a handful of magazines. Mm-hmm. So he does that and gets rejected by all of them. All of them say, nope, thanks, but no thanks. See ya. So, oh, well, I guess I'm not going to be a cartoonist. I guess a while later, maybe this is what happened. I'm trying to remember the exact order of events here. But what I think is what happened is that, so Scott Adams sent his cartoon to the people that this guy told him to. They all rejected him, so he got discouraged and gave up. Then John Mayberry, this random guy who he sent a letter to, sends him another letter unsolicited. So Scott never even wrote this guy a letter back thanking him for replying to him. He never said anything. He didn't send him like a correspondence saying like, thank you so much for responding. I'll give it the old college try and let you know how it goes. That never happened. He didn't do that. But this guy, unsolicited, sends him another letter that was just like, don't give up. It was like, I hope that you're still pursuing this. Don't give up, which is insane.
Yeah, that's great.
It is insane that this guy did this. Okay. And it shows you the power of encouragement, which is another thing that nobody does. Nobody encourages other people ever.
No, just letting them know that you think what they're doing is worthwhile is enough. It really is. Like, that's something that doesn't happen. To have, somebody who knows something, especially like you, Kevin, as YouTube things, whatever. I've seen you do this a bunch of times too, where, you'll just say like, yeah, this is good. Keep going. and that little tiny bit is a validation that what you're doing matters. So you don't even have to say like, wow, you're really awesome. You need to do this. I'm working with this girl now, who's, very young in the media game, just getting started on this. And it's actually a little bit of a problem that she's so good. She's great. And that means I can't say like, yeah, this is worth doing. You should keep going. I have to say the truth, which is, hey, this is really good. And I'm worried that it sounds like I'm giving this like unwarranted praise or whatever. So the feedback is actually tougher because she is legitimately so good. But yeah, just saying what you're doing is worth your time and everybody else's time consuming. That's everything. There's kind of nothing beyond that matters.
Yeah, just say, don't give up, keep going. And that was all this was. This guy just, for whatever reason, out of the goodness of his heart, sent Scott another letter that was essentially just, hey, don't give up on this, which is just such a miracle. It's insane to me that he did that. And because of that, he tried again. Because of that letter saying, hey, keep trying. He thought, okay. And he kept trying. It was literally like that was the impetus for him to keep trying. He had given up prior to that. So, I mean, you talk about the power of somebody just saying, hey, don't give up. Like literally that was what it took. So instead of, going back to the magazines, which had rejected him, he actually tried to do something which was way harder, which was get into newspapers. Mm-hmm. Supposedly that is like, that's the major leagues when it comes to comic strips, is to get into the newspapers. So he took like an even larger swing at submitting his stuff to the newspapers. Then from there, another like two more ridiculously improbable things happened after that. So he got rejected, from most of the people that he submitted to. I believe he said there are only like 6 agencies that handle, comic strip selling and syndication for newspapers. Got rejected from 5 of them. Then he tells a story about how one of them, it was a woman who was on like a road trip with her husband. Okay. And they're like stuck in traffic and the husband is bored. Again, there's this before smartphones. He couldn't just doom scroll. So he needed something to do. So he reaches into the back seat and he grabs a pile of submissions for comic strips that his wife has to review, during their trip or whatever. She brought her work with her. She's got like a folder full of different comic strips. The husband picks up the folder and is just leafing through them. And apparently is like hysterical laughing at the Dilbert comics, like out loud laughing, in love with these Dilbert comics. And the wife was confused because she had read them and like didn't like them. She didn't get them.
Oh, they were her rejects.
She was going to pass on them. Yeah, she was going to be like the final pass on Dilbert, and it was going to be dead forever. Mm-hmm. So she is like, "Why do you like this comic?" Well, it turns out her husband was an engineer.
Okay.
And Dilbert is like engineer office humor.
Yes. It's you've got to understand why those things are funny.
It was basically like a comic tailor-made for this guy and his life. Like you couldn't have made a better comic for him. It was like everything that he encounters on a day-to-day basis put into, 3 panels of humor. So she trusted her husband. She took a chance on it. She, passed Dilbert along. It made it into print, blah, blah, blah. It picks up more steam. And then like the final piece of improbability to this story is that apparently, so there are different sellers, I guess, all over the United States for all the syndication, all the different newspapers. The seller who handled the West Coast hated Dilbert. So there was no chance that Dilbert was going to get into any newspapers on the entirety of the West Coast of the United States until apparently this guy just drops dead, like very young. I don't recall what he said.
The gatekeeper. Well, the gate swings open then, doesn't it?
Yeah, the guy died. The guy who was keeping Dilbert out of the West Coast literally died. And, the new person came in to take his job and ended up, liking Dilbert and putting it into the West Coast. And now all of a sudden it's in like every newspaper across the country. But it was this ridiculous series of improbable events that I don't even like Dilbert. Like I never got it. I
love Dilbert.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always found it boring.
There were 2. You're boring.
I guess.
How about
so.
that? No, in like 1995. Well, think about it too. In Dilbert's heyday, we were not office engineers.
Yeah, no. I was like 11.
Yeah. There were 2 camps back in the day. In this category. So like you can't compare something like Calvin and Hobbes to Dilbert. They're different animals, right? But I think you loved the Far Side or you loved Dilbert.
Yeah.
It was very much a Coke Pepsi. Yeah. And I can see you loving Far Side.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is totally Coke and Pepsi.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like Dilbert. I thought Far Side was, it's sort of how I feel about something like the Beatles, where I'm like, I totally get why everybody else loves this. I like some of it. Some of it's very good. I can remember Far Side cartoons like the like School for the Gifted door, and he's pushing on it and it says pull.
Yes.
Like that's a great single frame piece of art.
Yes.
That's fantastic. But I didn't, like sit there and scroll through like all the Far Sides.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, that was kind of a tangential story. I feel like it's related to the success stuff, and because, he did tell, other stories about, the other thing that I guess relates to the overall topic is that at one point he loses his family. He loses his wife, and she had kids, I guess, from a previous marriage. So he lost his stepkids. And like in that moment, similarly, I think thematically to Paul Reubens deciding to kill Paul Reubens, and become Pee-wee Herman, Scott Adams also decided to, I guess, cope with the loss of his family by instead turning all of his attention into trying to reach as many people as possible. So, like, rather than, okay, I have this nuclear family that I will dedicate, most of my time and attention to, he decided I will instead dedicate most of my time and attention to my fans and people I'll never meet through things like writing books and doing a podcast and all of that stuff. So I always find it really fascinating when people are kind of upfront about those types of decisions, because I actually had a moment in my youth where I did something really, really similar. I don't know if I've ever talked to you about this or mentioned this on the podcast. A little bit of lore. I guess so. Maybe I've mentioned it and I just forgot. That's possible. But I literally had a moment when I was probably, I want to guess, like 20 years old, something like that.
And we didn't really know each other then at all.
No,
so I wouldn't have witnessed this.
No. This was
for context's sake, we didn't actually talk until we were like mid to late 20s.
Yes.
We knew who each other was, and that was the extent of it. We had a couple like semi friends in common, but not really.
Not really. Yeah. Not really.
So I wouldn't have witnessed this or known about it is the point.
No, this was pre-Tabor, where I had a breakdown. This is going to sound so overly dramatic, but it was like very important to me, where I felt torn between essentially being a consumer of art and being a creator of art. Like, for whatever reason, in my like weird, crazy person brain, I saw these as different paths. Like, the meme where the boy is standing between the forked roads, and there's like a castle that's gloomy on one side and sunshine on the other. This was that.
This is Which Way, Western Man?
Yeah. Which way, Lieberman? Because I'm a huge fan of art. Like, I love so much, like literal art, like illustration and all of that type of art. I love music so much. I love anime. Like manga, I think is super cool. Now I'm obsessed with reading books.
And you treat video games as art too.
Video games too. Yeah, absolutely.
You really do. So yeah, it's kind of everything that can possibly be construed as art you take pretty seriously.
I'm a fan of. I love it. Yep. And I love it. And there's way too much in one lifetime to become a fan of all of it. Like, comic books are one thing that I don't know anything about. Nothing. Mm-hmm. I don't know anything about all the different iterations of Superman or Batman or Spider-Man. I have no idea, because at one point I had to decide, like, I can't be a fan of all of the things. It's too many things. Anyway, I think that you can probably guess what my decision was.
Yeah.
Which fork I went down. I decided to mostly give up the amount of time that I was spending being a fan of art and instead use that time to create stuff. Mm-hmm. So yeah, like, I don't know that much about movies. I literally just started reading books like last year. I don't know anything about comic books. I've read like one manga. I've read like half of Berserk. Like, I don't know this stuff because I had that crossroads decision earlier in my life where I said, I'm going to think about and work towards making the things. And the trade-off there, going back to trade-offs, is that I'm just not going to have that much time for enjoying what other people have created, because there's only so much time in the day. Like, you really can't do both. And you hear this with, I think that David Lynch, maybe David Lynch was an example of this, where, people would ask him, I could be wrong about this, so I'm not saying this with like pure confidence, but I believe that he is one of these people who, would be interviewed about what his favorite movies are. and he would be like, I don't know. I don't really watch that many movies. Like, I make them. It's like, I have no idea.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't sit around watching movies. I sit around dreaming of, crazy Twin Peaks stuff. That's how I spend my time.
This is a real issue, and the fact that you recognized that there was a kind of a finite resource that you were dealing with there, time, energy, and mental energy really truly is a thing.
Oh yeah.
Okay. And most people don't understand this because, it's kind of boundless for a long time. And as you get better at the thing that you're doing, it becomes much more taxing to do it. When you're at a lower level, it's pretty easy. So as an example, 20 years ago, I could pull all-nighters writing. It was just a question of like caffeine. If I had to get something done, I could work all night until it was done. The reason I could do that wasn't because I was like 21. It was because I wasn't good enough at writing to have it be hard to do. Now I can't do that. When I write a script, now I do it in one session, but I take a very long time to prepare for that session. It could be 6 weeks. It could be 2 months. It's however long I've been thinking about the thing, researching it, whatever. And then I sit down and I pound it out. I do that for two reasons. One, by the time I'm doing it, I have confidence in the expertise I have to write the script. And number two, I can use that window efficiently, and it is really taxing. But that's all I can take. That is all I can take because it is so hard. And, this is self-aggrandizing, etc. But I'm sufficiently good at what I do that doing it is much, much harder than when I was starting. Mm-hmm. Right. So it is a very real trade-off to say, I'm going to do X instead of Y. I'm only capable of doing this for so long. I have to factor that in. What are all the other things I can't do? I can't do to be able to do the thing that I should do. And it can be big and conceptual. It can be as simple as when I was recording a bunch of narration stuff, I couldn't drink the tea that I liked on that day. So, or the day before. So there were two rules when I was recording a lot of audio, and that was no outdoor work, basically like 24 hours before, because I kick up enough dust, sawdust, whatever, that it makes my throat scratchy the next day. And nothing involving lemon the day of. And I liked all sorts of lemonade and lemon-based iced teas and stuff like that. So no dirt, no lemon. Well, believe it or not, that altered a lot of days, a lot of routine, and you have to be like, oh, it's Wednesday. I have to switch to, V8 Diet Splash today. Can't be a lemon day, so the trade-offs can be mundane and stupid like that. And it can also be like, okay, how am I going to spend all of my off time? Am I going to enjoy TV shows, or am I going to very, very deeply think about them? We've been talking so much about books lately, both a little bit on the podcast, but a lot outside of it. And I remember telling you a couple of weeks ago that I'll read a chapter of something and then think about it for like 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. I read through the first John Updike book because I'd read it so long ago that it was okay to read through, and I was familiar with his writing, so I didn't have to think about that, whatever. Well, now I'm reading the sequel to it, and I'm like 8% in. The little Kindle tells you your percentage, which is cool. But it's a completely different scenario. It picks up like 10 years after the first book. And after 10 years, the main character is the same in some ways and very different in others. His life's different. It's hard, but I'm capable of thinking about it in a way that I wasn't when I was 16. or that that I wasn't when I read Rabbit Run the first time, which I was probably 19 or 20. Totally different process. And so I have to think about this. I have to do the trade-offs, and it's constant. It's absolutely constant. We talk about Pee-wee and Paul, both at, working together for him and at war with each other. What I do for work and my actual life is Pee-wee and Paul. There is such a distinction between the two. I deal with stuff that's very high level with work. In my life, I love low level. I love simple people, which you need to understand that when I say simple people, that is a badge of honor. That is a compliment. It's actually very hard to be a simple person and live a simple, clean life. It's much harder than being a complex person to reduce things to the essence. We share some simplicity, Kevin, you and I do. When we both got on here, we're both wearing plain white t-shirts today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
White t-shirt gang today.
Same Z's.
Yeah. We're not waiting in line for the next Supreme release or some, what is it, Labubu? Is that the new?
Yeah, Labubu. Yeah.
We're not doing that. So, very high end in some ways, very low end in others. And I struggle a lot with this because the two things do not mix very well. They don't. And so you have to do this kind of two separate lives thing, and it's exhausting. I mean, the example here is I'm trying to think of what I've done other than picking up food and going to a few auctions. I'm not sure I have done anything in months. I just don't want to. I don't have to. I see my family and talk to them and, talk to you and all that stuff. But I'm not going out and doing stuff. I have plenty to do here. I'm always doing stuff here. On Wednesday, I'm on a plane to Tbilisi in Georgia to identify a project and hopefully shoot that project. These are just the pendulum swung hard left and hard right, It's not that I don't feel like it's disappearing or I'm squelching, my inner Paul Reubens. It's not that. But there's a divide between these two, and that's really hard. Number one, to have that life. Number two, to expect other people to function with that life too. That's a very, very weird thing for other people to have to deal with, whether it's straight logistics and schedule or whether it's, normal socializing, like the things you talk about. It's weird as hell. So you have this trade-off where you're separating things. And at a certain point, maybe you don't want to separate them as much. Well, how do you square that? It's hard.
Yeah. So there are a few things that came to mind that I really want to mention before we wrap up. One is that when you were talking about how it could be easier to do things when you're naive than when you have further information about it, I've heard that in MMA interviews. MMA guys have talked about this. Yes. I listened to an interview recently. I don't know if it was Corey Sanhagen or who, but they were talking about how when you're naive and you're like a young fighter, it's often actually easier than when you have done it for a long time and you know so much more about it. There's a hesitancy that comes along with your head of knowledge that actually makes fighting harder. So when you don't really know what you're doing, sometimes you, as a fighter, I mean, we always talk about creative stuff, but we're talking about literally just getting into a cage and trying to punch someone. They were saying actually you're freer and it's easier to fight when you're more ignorant of the details of it, which is fascinating.
Absolutely. And we're going to do this dichotomy right on this topic because we're going to Vsauce two eyes what you just said. This was something in Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow. He talks about what is essentially the concept of beginner's luck. And this so often pops up in like sports and physical things and whatever. You know, somebody has this amazing performance despite never having, you know, picked up a golf club before. You know, they hit some nasty drive that's like perfectly straight down the fairway. It's like, what? Beginner's luck. Well, no, they're just not burdened by the knowledge of how they should be doing it, or how they're totally unburdened and they're totally fresh. And the more you know, the worse it can be. The worse it can be. And this is a huge YouTube problem, because the thing that ruins so many YouTube people who try to continue to do videos, right, is their bullshit from vidIQ and TubeBuddy and right. Gurus on whatever, you know, here's 10 things you need to do to edit. All of that information just destroys them. It's just not good, right? And it takes talent and energy and excellent expression, doing unconventional things, which helps you stand out when you're doing something unique. Well, all of a sudden, congratulations, you're the same as every other boner trying to get 100,000 subs, because now you know more.
Yeah.
It's a paradox in there.
It is. And speaking of paradoxes, good word to make this transition is I wanted to say real quick, a little something about me is that when you mentioned people coming up to me, excuse me, and wanting to talk about like math and science stuff, let me give you a little bit of a insight into Kevin Lieber. Okay. Are you ready for this?
Yeah.
I can learn almost anything for a short period of time, but I will forget it almost completely afterwards. And it's been this way.
How long are we talking? How many, is it days? Is it weeks?
Probably a month. Yeah, probably a month or so
good.
Later, it will be gone. And this has been a problem my entire life. And I'll give you an example. In high school, I was pretty good in math class because we would learn how to do whatever it was, some function or quadratic formula or whatever. I would learn it. I'd understand it. I'd figure it out. Boom. I'd nail the test. I did horrible on the Regents exams at the end of the year, which were, an accumulation of everything that you had learned throughout the year. Because if I hadn't done the thing in months, it was gone completely from my brain. So like even recently I had a call where I had to talk about some videos that I made years ago. Parando's paradox was one, Ant on a rubber rope.
Okay.
And they were asking me like finer details about those concepts. And I was like, guys, I don't know. Like, I don't remember. Like, if you give me a few days.
It's been like 6 years.
Yeah. If you give me like a few days to learn it again, I'll tell you everything about it backwards, forwards, upside down. But without that prep, it's just gone from my brain. And like, I know almost as much about this as you do. Like, it's emptied out of my head. The last thing I want to end on is just throwing out this idea of deciding whether you're a consumer or a creator. That's a decision that I think is helpful for people to actually think about. And it doesn't mean you have to do one or the other completely hard, but you can't do both hard.
We do have some time. Do you see the message I just sent you?
Yeah. Okay, great.
I just got a text. I got to stay. Well, we should have been. And I got a stay of execution by 15 minutes. Got a meeting pushed. I'm thrilled.
Okay.
I am thrilled because this is so good. And as we've been talking about it, I've just been thinking like, there's a lot of standalone topics to talk about here. And I think that on this one that you just, return to here, I think that's something we need to talk a lot about, and that we can start by playing with it now.
Well, how do you want to play with it? Because for me, like I said, it was very much when I was at this crossroads when I was younger, where I just felt like, okay, I can do one of these with all of my heart. And I think that either one that I do, I would be happy with. But I ultimately decided that one of those paths I would be a little bit happier with than the other, which was I felt like creating would ultimately be more fulfilling for me than just consuming. That was my personal decision. And it's a hard one because there's a lot of failure with creating. I mean, it's almost
it's all failure.
Nothing but failure. Whereas with consuming, it's like nothing but
until it's not.
But reward. Like if you just consume the things that you love and there's more of it and there's an endless supply of it, it's just fun. I mean, that's pretty appealing. It's pretty appealing.
Well, but we did talk about this with writing and book stuff just the other week, that to create writing, a book, you have to consume a lot of books.
Yes.
You have to. So this is why I was like, oh, this is actually really complex. When you said that you had to make this distinction between the two things, in most cases, music is another one. Where when you hear somebody who's a wildly talented musician talk about, it's like, oh, what got you into music? What'd you like as a kid? They invariably say some version of like, I listened to everything I could. Any cassette I could get my hands on, I listened to. Reggae, rap, country music, whatever was in my hand, I listened to. And then it kind of went from there. But how do you create things of exceptional value? How do you create things that are fulfilling to both you and the people who are consuming them without consuming a lot yourself? Where's the balance? And does it have to be a balance? You made this decision. You made this choice in a way that I didn't. And that's why I'm asking. I haven't been through this one. So I'm asking you to describe what that balance is.
Well, you're obviously, you have to continually be exposed to different art to gain inspiration for sure. And to keep yourself on some sort of path where you understand what you're working towards. I think specifically when it comes to something like writing and reading, I made a switch from, watching TV. Like I haven't watched a TV show. I was watching Columbo for a while. But other than that, I haven't really been watching almost any TV. What I did instead was dump the TV and replace that with reading. Okay. Because there's a utility behind that switch. The utility is like, I need to immerse myself in different writers and different genres and different styles of writing and storytelling in order to better inform myself with my own writing. So I think that like part of what you need to do as a creator is also to focus on what it is that you're creating and make time for living in that world. So that's why I'm reading now instead of, my downtime is not spent on movies. I don't really watch movies anymore because I'm not interested in watching movies. If I was interested in, for instance, creating a graphic novel rather than writing a book, that's what I would switch to. I'd be just getting my hands on every graphic novel that I could. That's how I would fill my downtime because you can't work all the time. You're always going to have downtime.
Yes.
Well, it's not actually healthy to do that all the time. You have to, refill the pitcher in your brain with some stuff from elsewhere, or else, you only have so many decisions that you can make during a day.
I suppose, yeah.
So at some point there has to be some like rest mode for your brain. And the choice is, well, how do I use that rest mode in a way that fulfills what I'm trying to do creatively? So that is the calculus, I think, that's involved with being a consumer or a creator. If I was just consuming, then I would watch every movie and I'd watch every TV show and I'd read every book and I wouldn't be worried about making anything.
Yeah. This, by the way, the Discord, the episode chat is blown up over this. Because this is something that pretty much everybody relates to and has experience with. It's super nuanced, super interesting. And Jen said that she goes through cycles of each, and I see a lot of people do that. Where they will obsess over consuming a thing and then obsess over creating a thing. And these two work in tandem like that. So it's not an all or nothing.
No, it's not
situation. No. And then Will talks about the balance that consume a piece of new art that tweaks what you're working on. And that can be technique. That can be actual technical elements. It can be, it can be feelings too. It's like, oh, this thing resonated with me in a way that I'd like to explore that with, whatever I'm doing. And Richter actually talks about Augustine, which is really interesting. Augustine being, 2 millennia old here. Spending all this time as a young man in the Roman Empire, consuming the ancient literature and poetry, and then eventually using that, to do his own output, which was prolific as an adult. And that. So it's funny. I am thinking about what I did versus what you did, Kevin, and you jumped into creating things way, way before I did. And I essentially consumed people like a cannibal, their souls, their minds and their souls. I enmeshed myself in many, many, many different peoples before I ever made anything, before I ever, I can't even think what was first, but I must have been nearly 30 before I bothered to make anything. And it wasn't even my stuff. I've made virtually nothing myself. I've done things in support of what other people are making, helping them make it. But there's a reason why I don't have a YouTube channel. I'm not making videos. I'm not doing a solo podcast. So that's a different track. So you had a drive to do something that I had a drive in a different direction.
Yeah. And I do want to be clear that I'm not saying that, like, if you're choosing the path of creation, that you just lock yourself in a cabin in the woods with nothing but like a typewriter and you just are making things from some sort of inspiration and muse that's, otherworldly.
That's what most people try to do, though, is
that's
they
not
lock
gonna
themselves in their bedroom and put on their headphones and like arrange their desk a certain way and put on the music that they like and do all of this kind of performative stuff. It's like, sit down, like, I'm going to be an artist now. Like, no, it doesn't work like this at all.
No, but I think that, and also, everybody's different and there are different ways that people can get inspired. However, like I said, with the writing, I'm immersing myself in reading so that I could become a better writer. Like, there's a specific motivation for the art that I'm choosing to consume. Similarly to people like Quentin Tarantino or Martin Scorsese, who, as opposed to there's a stark contrast between them and my David Lynch story earlier, where they're cinephiles. Like, those two have watched every single movie that's ever been made. Quentin Tarantino famously worked at a video rental store for years.
Yeah.
And just watched every single movie and then was able to translate that into creating movies. But it's an important thing to, I think about and admit to yourself, or at least have some sort of plan behind, where you say, like, look, if there is like a particular thing that I'm interested in creating, then maybe that's what I should be consuming. And it doesn't have to be a hard and fast rule where you ignore everything else. But at some point you have to make these sort of decisions, because you can't be a fan of everything and then still have time to make stuff.
You can't. And I do think that people avoid making that decision. But they justify it that like they're always prepping. They're always consuming. They're always, they're delaying just making the hard choice and doing it.
Procrastination, yeah.
It is, but they think of it as being very productive. And it is. But this is,
to a point.
I think of this like the McClellan problem. Okay. And this is obscure, but it's not. George McClellan ran the Army of the Potomac in the Civil War, eventually what became the Army of the Potomac. He was a Union general who was one of the best preparers of soldiers and drillers of soldiers. And he was absolutely beloved by everybody under his command too. They really loved him. He was outstanding at management, but he was always preparing to fight and never fought. He always overestimated how many troops usually Lee had, but if he would double the estimates of the enemy forces and say, well, I just need another 100,000 troops. I need 200,000. He was always preparing and did not do very much. That's eventually why things didn't work out with him as kind of overall commander in that part of the war. And eventually this went to Grant. Simply, there's a quote by Lincoln about this. It's like, somebody says that, Grant's a drunk and a zilch and whatever. And Lincoln's like, yeah, but he fights. It came down to that. And that's kind of the breakdown here too, right? Where you can be that McClellan guy and just always be prepping, always be preparing, always needing more. It's with tech too, where it's like, I just need this software. I just need this graphics card. I just need whatever it is. I just need this computer. People do this constantly. Look, you gotta fight. Yeah. You don't win the war by preparing. It doesn't work that way at all. And there's a blend. You can't just fight and be wholly unprepared. That's disastrous. So you need a little bit of McClellan and you need a little bit of Grant. And that's the balance you've got to strike. You can put it off with creative stuff. It didn't eat at me that I didn't do any writing for 10 years. That didn't bother me. Kevin, I know it would have bothered you.
Yes.
You would have lost your mind.
Yes.
The top third of you would be splattered on a ceiling in a Cobain-esque pattern. If you hadn't just said, I need to make some stuff.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And you also would have been really bothered by the part that I love, which is the constant kind of research. I love that. I really love going to places and figuring it out and then trying to come up with something out of that. I've done this many times. The spaghetti chair process, you didn't like that process.
No.
Like that stressed you out.
Yes.
I love that process because it was like a dream come true to me. That it was like, we have to invent a topic and then figure out how to do it in 7 days in Italy with spaghetti. And people we don't know from Budapest and people that was amazing. I love that. You can go a couple different ways on this. But finding the balance that fits you, that lets you be Pee-wee without, murdering Paul Reubens. There's a lot here, and I hope that we keep talking about it.
Yeah. The lesson is, at some point, you do have to fight, though. So that's it for us this week. Thank you to all of our patrons for joining us during the recording. You can do that by joining our Discord. That's where we record, on Discord. It's a lovely time. We have a live chat here where we can respond to your insights. If you want to become a patron, go to patreon.com/thecreateunknown to support this podcast. And until next time, we will see you, Space Cowboys.
Thanks for listening to The Create Unknown. We make this show with the support of our patrons. 100% of that goes directly to keeping episodes going every week. And the recent support has been amazing. Sid Poke, NRM, Venture Addicts, Weezer Good, you all really do make this show happen. Thank you to the Tots and the Dumpster crew, old and new, who save tiny little lives every month. And thank you to our grizzled, battle-hardened child infantry. Clemente de los Santos, Dan the Latch, Demetrius Andrews, Erica, Ferrycoon, Jen Mefasanti, Kevin Menard, Mikhail Steinke, Monahim, Natsu, Penny Piddler, Ryan Steer, Ryan Kinder, Samuel Manser, Sean S., Sean Malone, and Tom Bidiover. And a tremendous shout-out to our elite baby gang commanders. Atrocious Scuff, Kat, Dojangles, Graham Robertson, James Gallagher, Jeff Davis, Orange Vanilla Coke, Patrick Pister, TCU's personal pilot, Andy, Ryan Carroll, Baseweight Vinthos, Yeetus Delitus, Jonas Walter, Nathan Robinson, and of course, Trev Stead. You are the elite. Thank you as well to our indentured servants, producer, editor Ben Webster, Minecraft mogul Laterman, Discord kitten wrangler Conrad, and producer emeritus Dan Yoshua. Thanks to Baseweight for use of Created in the Unknown for the opening theme. Thanks to Electro Voice for giving us mics to sound good on top of it, and thanks to Main Gear for powering all our PC endeavors. The Create Unknown is an Unknown Media production in partnership with Studio 71.